Good evening, everybody, and I appreciate everybody coming out. So my story starts a long time ago. I was a 23-year-old single father, and I had just bought my first place because I wanted to really do something here to solidify what I was providing for my son, and I was really into it. And I remember when we got into the place, and I sat down and looked, and I said, I need to finish this up. I need to get you a family. I need to get a woman in here and let's make something happen. And I started dating, and this is not like this time where you could swipe back and forth. You had a lot of blind dates, walking around in the grocery stores and hanging out in bookstores. And I finally met somebody, and it was really cool. And you had to make this work back then. So I went and I talked to this guy. He was an older professor of mine that I trusted. And I said, hey, could you hit me with some wisdom here about relationships and about marriages? And he says, well, I'm on my fifth wife, and this guy. And he says, well, the goal of getting married is that one of you will bury the other. It would make sense that you know what one another wants on the tombstone, because you're going to be around while that shit's happening, and you should know what path you got to walk on. And I said, brilliant, this works. This is amazing, I got the answer. So I call up my girlfriend and I says, hey, let's go out, I got a question for you. And she said, okay, let's do this. And I pick her up, we go to the restaurant, and I says, what's your question? I says, well, I've been thinking about this, and what do you want on your tombstone? She says, my tombstone? What the fuck? I've never thought about dying, and I damn sure haven't thought about what I want on my tombstone. I was kind of disappointed. I was like, geez, what the fuck here? What am I doing? And she says, well, I can tell you what I want. I want a loving husband, and I want a really good father for whatever kids we might have. And she has a little girl, and I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna work. We can come together. We can be like a little black Jewish Brady Bunch. This is gonna be amazing. So I had to meet her daughter though, and I'm thinking I can do this. This is going to be amazing. I meet her, and she's a cute little girl. She's got these little pigtails, these little big eyes. And it's Halloween when I meet her, and she's dressed as Power Ranger. She's all excited. She says, "Hey, how you doing? I like your outfit." And she says, "What are you dressed as?" I says, "Well, I'm not dressed as anything." And she says, "Well, why don't you have a costume?" I says, "Well, I really don't celebrate." She says, "Oh, you poor?" And I says, "Oh, no, really, I mean, I just don't have." She says, "Well, you're not going to get any candy if you don't have a costume." And I says, "I'm not really in this for the candy. I'm kind of here for the thing." She says, "And if you don't have a costume and you're poor, my mom's probably not going to date you." And I'm thinking, shit, my mom's going to marry me, and I don't give a shit about candy, but we get married. Things are a little rough in the beginning. And in like the first few weeks, my wife had to go out of town and my son was somewhere else, and I said, hey, this is my opportunity. What do you want to do today? Anything. We can go to a museum, a park, a zoo, anything. She looks at me and she says, I want to see you die. I said, I'm sorry. So you want some ice cream? Ice cream sounds great. And she says, I said, what did you say? You said a little loud. She says, I want to see you die. And I said, oh shit. I really got my mouth set with some ice cream. I said, I'm working on this deaf thing, but I'm probably not going to be able to help you today on that. And I was a little bothered, and I talked to my father about this, and he says, stop telling her stuff and just listen. I was like, no, Dad, I'm a grown man. I'm not listening to a little 4-year-old girl. He's stop talking to her and listen. I started listening, and it was hard. I'm a former Marine. I don't know what the hell the little girl had to tell me, but I listened, and God damn it, I started learning all sorts of stuff because, guys, I've never been a little girl. So everything she told me was like brand new to me. And she told me stuff I can tell you, like this one little thing. You know this BFF thing, best friend forever, right? Well, you can eventually hate that bitch, right? And you can hate her so much that it's okay for me to drive you and her to the movies. Guys, these are 10-year-old girls. They're doing Sun Tzu's Art of War 101 right in front of me. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. It was great. She became my little sidekick. It was great because that marriage gave me 2 more little girls, and good God, they had a whole new book of lessons, but she was right there beside me. Well, the marriage didn't go so great. 20 years, and I realized I'm not going to be able to do this tombstone with the loving husband, and we get a divorce. But the really cool thing is, the daughter I got, she stuck with me. And I was like, oh shit. So I started dating. And who did I go to talk to about that? Her. She says, hey, you want to get some Ethiopian? I said, sure, let's go get some Ethiopian, whatever. I got to talk to you about something. So we go to get the Ethiopian, and when we order, I order another egg. And she says, you know how to order like that? I said, yeah, Ethiopian is my favorite cuisine. I eat it all the time. She says, oh. She drinks her tea, and she looks up, she says, in 20 years, I never had Ethiopian with you. I says, well, yeah, that's because your mom hated it, and we weren't going to eat that. She says, but for 20 years, you never ate? I said, well, it's a communal food. It's not something you do by yourself. She says, oh, okay. I said, well, I got something I want to talk to you about. She says, okay, hey, are you still doing your jujitsu? And I says, well, no, a lot of the people there, they knew your mom, and I don't feel like talking. She says, so you're not choking anybody? I says, I haven't choked anybody in months. And she says, wow, but I got something I want to talk to you about. And she says, well, wait a minute, are you writing, or are you still in classes? And are you doing this? Well, I don't really want to think about writing much, because of the divorce. And I stepped back on my class. She says, okay, what do you want to talk to me about? I said, well, yeah, that's what the hell. I met this lady, she's this doctor, and you're going to love her because, well, she's really smart, and she loves to cook like you, and your brother's going to love her because, well, she's always got food, and she likes weed, and your little sister's going to love her because, well, she smokes weed, and your middle sister's going to love her because, well, she's a fucking hypochondriac, but she might not like her because, well, she smokes weed. And she says, why do you care? I says, well, because I'm your father, and you're my kids, and I want to fit somebody in just right. And she says, we're almost adults. Why do you care? You should pick somebody for you. What do you like? I says, oh, shit. Because I went from being priority number 6 to priority number 1 like that after all those years. And then I thought, wow. So as I'm sitting up there going there, she says, hey, when's the last time you've been sailing? You made my brother and I go through all those lessons. When's the last time you've been sailing? I says, well, I didn't go much sailing. She says, I know, because mom fucking hated sailing. I said, yeah, she hated sailing, so we haven't. She said, well, we're going sailing. In 3 weeks, she rents a boat, a little 19-footer. We go out sailing. She almost gets in an accident, like twice. We almost capsized, we're laughing. When we get off the boat, she's like, wasn't that fun? And I'm like, you don't know the half of it, sister. The stuff I saw, the birds, the water, the way it felt, hitting that wind, and the way the sun was setting, my life had changed. I no longer gave a shit about a tombstone because I was more interested in that dash. It ended up, guys, started choking people again. I ended up choking people and competing in jiu-jitsu on 4 different continents and getting my black belt. I ended up publishing 8 books. I got my doctorate. In sailing, I put in enough hours to get my sailing captain's license. And I live on a 40-foot sailboat out on the Potomac. I sail all over the world. It's really interesting because the kid who wanted to see me die had encouraged me to live. And she became my ride or die. As far as the tombstone, I don't give a fuck. I told my kids, because I travel, I said, if you found out I died, just be like, oh, no, we don't know him, he's right here, and just let my body rock wherever it is. And if I'm on my boat, just push me in the water and see what's happening. Because it's all about the dash. And I appreciate you. Guys, happy Pesach. Simplified to that other crazy ass Marine I saw out here. And Please have a fantastic evening.